Hello, everybody, and welcome to Creator Toolbox, the show brought to you by the ServiceNow Developer Program, where you can see all of the ServiceNow new features brought to you by the latest release. Usually, in the upper right-hand corner, you will see the logo for the release that we are currently in. I don't know where that is currently, but
Oh,
perfect. It is
oh,
Vancouver.
this side.
So, yeah, perfect. Thank you, Jingfei. So if you'd like to check out the remaining content for the Vancouver release, you can check out devlink.sn/Vancouver. Now, before we jump into today's very exciting concept of the dynamic inputs on ServiceNow, I have an entire list of exciting announcements for you. So let me get through those very quickly first. First of all, we are in the middle of the hashtag Build with RPA challenge. Currently, that is an initiative to not only learn about RPA, but showcase to the internet, to social media, what RPA has the capacity to do for you and your organization. Currently, that is running until October 13th. So you have exactly 10 days left to enter, and participants get a free shirt. So, always a nice way to build out your ServiceNow wardrobe. After that, so ending on October 31st, is Hacktoberfest. So Hacktoberfest just kicked off on October 1st. It is an initiative by forgive me, thank you for the link. DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean puts on this initiative every year to kind of remind the community the importance of using things like GitHub and source control. And so that is an initiative that we as ServiceNow developers all kind of collaborate on. So you can visit devlink.sn/Hacktoberfest to participate. And that's also an opportunity to win another free shirt. So if you're really lacking in shirts, those two are definitely to add to your calendar. Fourth, which hasn't started yet, are the Devies. So you may recall from Knowledge 23 that the Devies were our big App of the Year contest. Last year, this process kicked off in February, but we were doing so earlier as to kind of stagger out the competition behind the scenes a bit better. So the submission window starts October 20th and ends November 15th. So you have about a month, give and take some holiday days, to get in your submissions. And finally, which is most importantly, I would say, we also have the CreatorCon call for content. Every year, ServiceNow opens the door to all of our lovely customers to enter the capacity to showcase your talent and knowledge at the Knowledge Conference. That call for content will begin October 23rd and go through November 13th. So again, both those dates for Devies and call for content, we're shouting out a bit early due to holidays and all the things that are starting off soon. And that is the end of my promo. So finally, we can dive straight into the Creators Toolbox episode. But before we do, I have to introduce my phenomenal co-host for today, Jingfei. So let's introduce yourself to the crowd.
Hey guys, my name is Jingfei. I'm the PM for Flow Designer. I'm the product manager for Flow Designer. And today I will be showcasing the new feature in Vancouver that's called Dynamic Input.
Awesome. We're so excited to have you here. I'm so excited to have you back. She actually joined us for a live coding happy hour a few episodes back, so be sure to check that out as well. My name is Lauren McManaman. I am one of the developer advocates hosting today. Also, shout out to Chuck Tomasi behind the scenes for doing all the production and switching. So much appreciated in that regard as well. So let's dive straight into the content. But I think it's pertinent to define what dynamic inputs are, first of all.
So in Flow Designer, we had previously rolled out features such as dynamic choice and dynamic template. But in Vancouver, we're rolling out dynamic input as in broaden up the concept to not only the choice value, but also and the template value, but the types of values are all supported. So that includes, which I will showcase in a moment, that includes regular string, choices, references, and even passwords. So there were a lot more data types that are supported. I would have to say this is a very technical feature, so it's not like for a first day user for Flow Designer, but I will do my best to show you how to use that and how powerful it is.
Absolutely. And so give us a small example too of an opportunity that would elicit using dynamic inputs. Like where does that usually pop up in use cases?
Yeah, so dynamic input, think of it as the UI policy on top of action input. So when you're trying to add a action on the flow, those actions input are usually statics, right? So it's the action, that's going to be the input, depends on the value. There might be some changes, but those are preset hard-coded. Whereas if you want some flexibility, if you want those input to be, dynamically set up or having some show, no show policy or any type of logic behind that input, then you need this feature called dynamic inputs.
Makes sense. So instead of just basing it off of like a field or something like that, it's based off of things that have previously occurred within the flow.
Right. Or somewhere else. Yes.
Gotcha. Makes sense. I've also heard them pop up a lot with regards to service catalogs because those have a lot more contingencies involved. So
yeah, exactly. So it depends on, for example, your end user could have different value or submit different things on service catalog. And then your catalog administration team could set up the catalog differently, right? So they can have one big catalog for a few different use cases all packed in one. And depends on how they set up, we can then fetch those variables dynamically. And that's dynamic inputs.
Very cool. Well, I'm excited to see this today. And I'll leave the ball in your court as far as sharing your screen.
All right. I have not shared my screen before on this. Let me try.
So on the bottom part, there's like a present button, and that's how, and then we can add it to the screen.
And then I'm showing this page or entire screen. One. Can you see?
Not yet. I think it's still loading, but we'll have to add it to our live stream here in just 1 sec. Did you, on the bottom part, did you click present and then share?
It's telling me Chrome has lost permission, so I'm trying to add it to Chrome.
Okay.
Screen recording. Let me try again.
Okay, 1 sec. Stand by, everyone. A small technical hiccup, but as expected early on a two. I guess it's not even a Monday morning; it's a Tuesday morning.
yeah, it's kind of early. Can you see my screen now?
Not yet. It will pop up for us on the back end, like by all the videos, and then I can add it from there. Okay. I don't see anything just yet.
Let me see if I can just share the page itself. That's going to be easier. Oh, this thing got shown. Oh, there we go. But sometimes I do need my other screen.
Perfect.
Oh, sorry. No, I took it away. sorry. Technical difficulties.
It's all good.
I just do that. No, it's
building anticipation. That's always
it's just only showing one. Can I do this?
No. There we go.
Oh, you can see it?
Yes. There we go.
Can you see if I switch tab, can you see both?
Yep.
Oh, fantastic. Awesome. Okay, cool. So let me actually start off by going to a regular flow. I'm just opening up a random flow. Like it doesn't matter which one to open. Gotcha. But as a regular input from a regular action, I'm just gonna say credit record. Why not?
Okay.
And then you see how these input are set per action. If you want to build any logic behind that, before Vancouver, you will have to use dynamic choice and dynamic templates. Dynamic choice is like a drop-down choice, basically like this, but this is a reference. But choice is more limited than this. Dynamic template are these fields that are depending on the choice, they will show up so they can actually retrieve what are all the columns from the table. But this is called template field.
Gotcha.
Dynamic input on top of these two fields basically support everything else. So that's what dynamic templates means.
Very cool.
For the purpose of this demonstration, I set up a previous action So basically what you need is a helper action, or sometimes I call it input provider action, that basically is the UI policy. Think of it as the action that holds the logic for UI policy, for dynamic input to show up. So it has logic to control, oh, if this input should show up or not, what should be the mandatory field, what should be the default, should it be mandatory or not? So host all the logic behind that.
Gotcha.
So for this, I'm just gonna walk through exactly what I did in this provider action, because since there's a little bit of scripting in here. So I don't have any input at the very beginning from the action, but as the first step, I'm looking up records that are incident with the description start with, my initial Jingfei. And then in the scripting piece, basically what I'm doing is, if the input urgency, so if that incident's urgency is high, is 1, then we have this one hard-coded default message. And then that default message is looped in as part of the output. So in order for the dynamic inputs to show up properly, we must have a output. It's called data here, but later in the output step, I'm actually going to connect that and wire that properly. So we must have an output saying, hey, these are going to be the dynamic input dynamically showing up when you're using your action.
Before we move on from this, can you zoom in on your screen just once or twice?
Yeah, for sure.
There we
go. Wait, am I zooming in? No, I'm not zooming in.
I think you did. Yeah.
Here we go. Here we go. Yeah. So this part is what I'm setting dynamically. So basically, it's looking at a urgency of a record that's outside of Flow Designer, completely outside, somewhere else in the platform, and depends on the field, it's gonna give you either the default message, right? Or I have an else statement, but basically just saying like it's outside of that if statement. So it's the same variable that I'm using in both places. It just depends on the urgency is having different value.
One question that we have from the chat is kind of interesting. Is this something that could also be done a bit more? There would be a bit more steps involved, but is the end result of this, could this also be done with decision tables instead of dynamic inputs?
Yes. Yes. For this specific use case that I'm showing you, a decision table, it's actually properly a more local way of doing that, so that you can listen to the input from somewhere else in the platform, take that into a decision table, and then spit out output properly. But then you can only set the variable or the value of the variable as part of the action input. You cannot set anything else.
True.
So for example, you cannot set the label of the input. You cannot set the default value. Is it what type is it? So you have some level of flexibility, probably already all right for your use case, but not to the full extent of what dynamic inputs can achieve.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right. So and then in my output step, I'm just looping out or like assigning the step output that was called data before, right? And so it was called data instead of JSON output. I'm just connecting that properly with the output of the action. So that's what I did in this provider action.
So this is part 1 of
yes,
dynamic inputs.
This is part 1. This is the UI policy behind the input. Gotcha. Now I need a separate action to actually, what is the action that's going to be used? And then so UI policy is going to apply on top of that. And therefore, I'm going to just, create a action, and I'll call that dynamic input consumer. And it's under global, so everything's in global for the sake of demonstration. I'm going to collapse this so I can see the way to create input. So I'm just going to call this dynamic inputs. And then in here, this is where the magic begins. So that you see previously, we support dynamic choice and dynamic template, but ta-da, we added dynamic input, in which we can say, oh, the input of this consumer action is we're applying the UI policy on top of it. So we call this input provider action. Okay, input provider. There you go.
Yes.
Yeah, so this in this field, it has all the existing input, all the published or actions that you have. So you can actually honestly choose everything as long as they have a output that's called output and has a JSON format. So as long as this any action that has this, it will then properly show up in the dropdown, in the dynamic choice dropdown here.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right. So let me save and publish. All right. Now I get this dynamic input consumer action. So let me just copy the name so I know how to find it later. Mm-hmm. All right. So now let's use it. So in a regular flow, let's then call it.
Ah, there she is. It popped up pretty fast. It's nice that you didn't have to refresh.
Right. And so far, it gave me some error messages. I wonder why. Okay, so let me see. All right, so this is troubleshooting live.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, so
we do it all the time.
So this, let me actually, so it's looking up all the inputs. So actually, let me go to the incident table. And create a new. The only condition we have is short description needs to start with JF. There we go. And then depends on urgency. Let me save this.
One of my, I'm glad that you do stuff like that too, to test, like on test records. I would always call them like Lauren's 8th test and stuff.
Yeah. I just want to like start everything with my initial. That's probably not best practice because
no, it's
at the end of the day, you'll have my name all over the platform.
Yeah.
But in case there are other developers doing testing in the same environment, then I know where to find it. True. So for this, so yeah, I think the error was caused by there was no incident before, but as soon as I created an incident, it was able to fetch one. And so what we are seeing on the screen is there is one incident with an urgency that's not 1, and basically is showing all these inputs that are dynamically fetched by the provider action. And so basically in the script of the provider action, I just said, let me collapse this actually. No, let me collapse this piece. Okay, so if the if statement didn't go in, then it go into else. Else means urgency is not high, then please show all these fields and all these types of the data types are supported. So it has password 2, HTML type, /bucket, email, integer, decimal, you name it. In the flow, I can actually, or when I'm using it, I can actually set different, what are the types, what are the label, the value behind, should it be mandatory or not, etc.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah, one use case we have seen or we have heard from our business people is the password 2. So basically they want to, this is an authentication step, and they really want to, depends on the endpoint of authentication, have different field, right? Because that's the parameter used for different APIs, and they need to set up the authentication right in the action. And so that's why we're supporting this value.
Very cool. That's awesome. So when all of those are taken in as inputs, where are they still accessible as like variables within the flow itself, like on the right-hand side?
Yeah, they are, but these are dynamic input. So let's say once I have some value configured in those variables, then depends on like my consumer action didn't have any output, but if it does, then it should show up in the in the output data pills, so that you can use the output of this action and then use it somewhere else.
This is very, very cool. I think that it's interesting because as someone that especially used to work on the sales side for Flow Designer and App Engine, you always hear comments of like, oh, like Flow Designer is great, but only for like low and no code. And I think
Mm.
features like this, like really showcase like there is a place for pro coding in Flow Designer, and it's in stuff like this. It's in designing actions, designing dynamic inputs, and things like that to make the no code experience even richer than it already is.
Yes, it's going to be very, very powerful. So let me show you changing this so you can see how dynamic it can be. Let me save that. So right now I'm just putting the urgency to 1 for this incident. And then after it loads, here we go. All right. So, and then once get back to the flow, I can fetch this again. You see how it's then changing the input?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, depends on, that's how I set in the helper action, in the provider action. And so right now it's going into the if statement. Remember, it's going into here. Yes. So that because urgency is high, it's then having the default value. I also set this mandatory to true. So if I get rid of this, and the mandatory is true, and then so the use case can be, oh, your flow author depends on how they want to set up the value. They can, use the default error message, but also can provide their own.
I love how it doesn't it truly is dynamic. Like it automatically changes without having to like refresh or redo anything or save again. Like it just showcases the differences immediately. That's so neat.
Yeah. One small pro tip when using dynamic input. So let's say you are, changing this somewhere else in the platform, changing a value, and but then you didn't come to Flow Designer to set this up. It's gonna take whatever the version that's already being published. So it just when you're using this feature, you need to architect it carefully so that you're think through the use cases of where is listening the value from, where is how you set up the logic to fetch things dynamically from somewhere else, and then because this is realizing in a Flow Designer design time, and so you want to make sure your designer, when they're designing it, the value are dynamic already changed, and so you can use your logic properly.
I love this. So one question I have is there any spot currently, like is there any lab or any documentation if people wanted to, because this is a bit more of a technical thing that people could use to practice or because it's so new, is that not yet out yet?
I believe the product documentation is already out on this feature. So dynamic input, we used to have like a practice little demo question exercise for dynamic template choice and template, but this equivalent for dynamic inputs is already out. We do have plan to showcase this feature next year in our next batch of lab exercise and walking through. So stay tuned.
Awesome. Well, I always like to shout this out too, is that whenever we do a CreatorCon call for content, whatever is the big thing is what we get the most submissions for, right? Obviously, like I think it would be foolish to not assume that most people will probably want to talk about like Gen AI or things like that at CreatorCon this year. So I see this as a massive opportunity if you can get your fingers on it and devise a cool, lab or presentation. This would be something I would find extremely helpful if I was in my previous job. So just to the people on this, if since CreatorCon call for content is coming up, this could be an interesting topic to dive into. And I selfishly want to further propagate the success of Flow Designer.
Oh, thank you. So nice, so generous.
Well, is there anything else that you wanted to cover or any other tips and tricks that you had?
Not tips and tricks per se, but like as I said, this is a very tech pro coder use case or feature for pro coder use cases. So I'd be curious to know the use cases that you have. So the way we design this is so flexible in nature, and it can support just any logic. It's enabling more flexible scripting in Action Designer. So it's so flexible in nature. And if you have a very good use case, or if there's something that you don't think it serves you, please let us know. Please reach out.
Awesome. Well, I'm so happy that you got to join us here again today. It's always a joy to have you on. Be sure to check out Jingfei's episode of Live Coding Happy Hour as well. That was extremely fun. That was talking about, that was the go back to action, which was also, I'm so phenomenally excited for.
Yeah.
As a quick rundown, once again, first of all, is there any way that if people had questions, obviously you can leave them in the comments of this video. But is there anything that you'd like to shout out as far as where they could reach out to you possibly if they had more? Like your LinkedIn or?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just checking comments to see if there's any question there. Yes, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. The Jingfei, that's my name on LinkedIn. Also, you can email me at jingfei.chen at servicenow.com. So I'm really out there. So please email directly. Reach out.
Awesome. So quick rundown of the promos from the beginning. End of October 13th is when Build with RPA ends. So if you want your Build with RPA shirt opportunity, do that. Hacktoberfest just started. It goes the entire month of October. It ends October 31st. So if you'd like to participate with that, join in the fun. The Devies open up for opportunities on October 20th and end November 15th. And then finally, as I kind of teased a bunch, the CreatorCon call for content opens on October 23rd and ends November 13th. Thank you again for joining us today, Jingfei, and showcasing dynamic inputs. It's something I definitely want to practice more, and I see as like a brave new frontier for the pro coding world of Flow Designer. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, audience, for joining us here on this lovely Tuesday morning or evening, wherever you are in the world.